lift guy here, and today we're going to talk about Genie's GTH 1056 and Genie's GTH 844 specifically. But before that, follow me on YouTube and Facebook. So today we're going to go through, you have a telehandler here that is not wanting to drive. That's basically the basic problem we'll start with, and we're going to go through some of the things that it's probably not going to be, that everybody blames it on, and we're going to go through a lot of things that has happened to me in the past, and basically go through that system to make this drive for you. And this can apply to not just the two models I specified, it's just I've specifically worked on these two models. Genie does the the same setup through a lot of their models. The ones that it's not going to apply to is, like, for example, the 5519. But this also can apply to basically almost all the other manufacturers do it. They all do it basically, you know, they have a certain amount of things they have accomplished, and these are all the safety things that the pressure sensors and stuff, that a lot of them are going to be a lot alike. JLG, some of the stuff, the things are going to be in different places. So, but basically they all do it about the same way. There's pressure sensors and relays, and, you know, basically it's all the same, except for they'll be having it in a different place, and, you know, different manufacturers will do things differently, but this will help you out when troubleshooting a lot of other telehandlers. So, first thing we're going to start on is the first thing that everybody loves to blame it on, I don't know why, is the shifter here. I don't know why everybody, I think it's because they can see it and they just think it's not working. But most of the time, in the last 20 years, I've replaced maybe 3. I know for sure 2. And of those 2, I can definitely remember the shifter. It wasn't that it didn't work. It's just that when you went to shift it, sometimes there was so much slop in it that you see how much slop's in it now. This one's working quite well, but see how much slop there is? So you'd move it around, and if you had it in gear with your foot off the brake and the park brake off, you could sit here and move it, and it'd go in and out of gear. So that's happened the last couple times that I've actually had to replace the shifter. But you figure 90% of the time, probably more like 95% of the time, it's not going to be the shifter. Second thing I've heard of not everybody, but some people blame is the park brake switch, which Genie did have a problem with these, but that was like 15 years ago that they had a problem with their park brake switch. I'm sure all those have been replaced. And since then, the only reason I replaced this park brake switch is because it either doesn't light up, or as you can see the little park brake emblem, so that you know that it's the park brake switch, if you haven't operated one of these before, wears off. So those are the 2 main reasons I replace them, because the light goes out and it wears the emblem off. Next item I'm going to go over is, it hasn't happened, it's happened a couple times, but it's real easy to check. So I wanted to, you're sitting here, there's a valve right here for the brakes, and basically as soon as you step on the brakes, it applies pressure to the brake system, and there's a pressure switch, which we'll go over later, that deactivates the transmission. So if you're stepping on this brake, and that's going to deactivate the transmission. But I've had it where this pressure switch, this valve back here behind that you're actually pushing on for the brakes gets stuck, and it gets stuck to where the brakes are on, and the pressure switch is going to stop it, is a safety device that's going to stop you from basically tearing your brakes off, which are internal. On this unit, this has internal wet brakes inside the front axle. So this has a safety switch that stops you from, if you happen to be stepping on the brake, you can't accelerate through and try to tear your brakes off. And also, if you step on it, I know for like sit down and counterbalance forklifts, this is the big one. You have what's called an engine pedal. You want to step on it and then you can take and rev on the engine to make the hydraulics work faster. Well, it's the same thing here. They want to deactivate the transmission so that that you can speed up the hydraulics, and so that it's not sitting there on the transmission all the time. So, but I've had this valve back here stick. One time it was stuck, it was hard. I actually had to take a little pry bar and pry it out. That was on a lot older of a unit. And the next one was, it was kind of sloppy. I just reached back here and pulled on the valve, and it instantly pulled it right up and started working again. But I wanted to replace, you need to replace the valve. So that's one easy thing you can check. And for older vintages of Genie telehandlers, you'll find that the relays are right here. There's a cutout right here with two little quarter turn flat tips that you take and turn, and then it'll drop down. That's where the relays are if you have an slightly older vintage of a telehandler. It'll be right here, and it has the same setup like on that relay board, except for it makes it easier for you to troubleshoot because you simply can take and pull the wire off and put it on the center, and it'll activate it, if you get what I'm saying. Next thing is to come in here. I'm going to show you through the open door, and I'm going to tell everybody this, but everybody's going to think this is boring and too simple, but I've run it. You don't believe how many times I've run across where it's just a fuse. And yeah, there could be other problems why the fuse is getting blown, but that at least gets you so you can move the machine if you need to, and use it at the exact moment and find out later. But I got put on 2 airplanes, one to another city and then another to a village, flying out just to change a fuse. And the customer said, "Oh yeah, I checked the fuses." Well, they didn't check them very good, because I replaced the fuse and it instantly started working, and I drove it around the whole village. And then on this is their board. On this there is, I can show you. Okay, so this is one of that same board I just showed you. The same one with all the fuses and the relays. This one's removed because this one was having problems. But if you look here, if you look real close right here, that's your forward relay, and this is your reverse relay. And these relays are going to be basically closed. Say, for example, alright, so this relay is your forward relay, and this one's your reverse relay. And what's happening in this system, so we're going to go over the system. Every time, like if you step on your foot brake, it takes and switches these 2 relays to the off position, so that when you take in that shifter, basically has power to it, and then takes and sends power to these relays. And if they're not switched into the right position, because say you're stepping on the service brakes, then it's not going to complete the circuit. So you can tell if your system, and everybody, I know some people say, "Oh, the transmission might be bad." I haven't replaced the transmission in one of these since I've been working on them. So usually it's not, and when I say the transmission, I mean the internals, the hard to get to parts. So if you want to take and see if the wiring from this board to your transmission is good, you simply pull this relay out and run a wire between that. These basically power to that wire right there, that pin right there I'm pointing to. You take it basically cross, because there's going to be power here, and if they're switched, so you can run power from there to these points. Basically, these 2 points right here, you take and have a jumper wire made up with spade connectors, so it looks like these. You can see so you take and turn your park brake off, and you can take and cross these 2, and if that puts into drive, that means the wiring from this relay, which goes through this plug, and then down through into the wiring harness and down straight to the transmission. So if you're crossing this and it drives, that means the wiring from this relay board out to this plug into your transmission is good, and your transmission is good. You know, that means it's probably one of the pressure switches. So you can take and cross these two wires to check that and get it to drive. That means that everything on, as far as the transmission is concerned, is good to go. Now, if you cross these and it does not drive, the other thing I've run into is, so if you jumper the relay and it doesn't drive, it's either one of these, it's either wiring or one of these solenoids here. And usually what's happened in the past is they've melted down. Okay, so there's two styles of park brake pressure switches. This is basically one style, and the difference being it's basically a 3-pin connector, which they're only, as you see, they're only using 2. And here is the other style, which has a little harness, and it's a 2-pin connector. That's basically the difference between the two. There's 2 styles, and it's dependent on the vintage. So you got to just make sure you get the right style for your machine. Alright, so I know I misspoke, but because it's the secondary function manifold. You'll see the function manifold here, and this is the manifold you're going to want, the secondary function manifold. And if you look where it is, it's right in the center of the machine. So, alright, you'll see 2 pressure switches down there. See where my magnet's touching? That is the park brake pressure switch. And this is what's called the newer style. Because I can see from here it's a 3-pin switch connector. This is a helpful trick. If it's an older style that has the 2-pin connector, you can actually take and unplug that wire and then come over here to the brake manifold, which that's what this is, and unplug the brake pressure, the clutch cutoff, and you can actually connect them together, which bypasses the 2 pressure switches. I wouldn't recommend it. I only recommend this for testing, because if you disable, basically if you're disabling that system, you could have the possibility of tearing up your brakes. So, for getting it, like, you know, for a mechanic who's getting it out, trying to get this machine off the job site, or you're trying to get it out of the way so you can fix it properly, it's a good little trick. You go on, and this is the other pressure switch you have to worry about. Is what they call it? It's called the clutch cutoff pressure switch. So basically, when you step on the brakes, it applies pressure to the switch. This switch is normally closed, and then you step on it and it opens it. And this one down here, so they are basically wired. The park brake pressure switch and the clutch cutoff pressure switch are wired in series. So the park brake pressure switch is normally closed and normally open, and then when you turn the park brake off, it closes. And the clutch cutoff switch is normally closed and opens when you step on the park brake. These 2 pressure switches are probably 60% of the problem I've had with one of these machines not driving. So, and you can bypass them if you need to for temporary by just connecting them together. And if you have like this one, which has the new style park brake pressure switch, you can still, if you connect them together, you can still make it work, or if you do it in the cab, like I showed you early in the video. And by the way, if you cross the other thing, it could be, the last thing is, it could be this relay board, the whole thing. So if you take an unplug right here, you can look in the wiring schematic. And the other thing is all the wires, and you can take and power up, pull this off, power up, and it'll send power right to your forward or reverse coil to the transmission. Because the reason why that's the reason why this board's sitting here, is because I had to replace it due to it was intermittent no drive, and it was just, it starts messing up inside, and it's not that uncommon for this board to go bad. It's just this board's more expensive, so you want to make sure this is the last thing. So that's where this connector, and it says right here, if you read right there, transmission harness. So unplug that and look in your wiring schematic, and you can apply power to the wire for the forward coil, and that will get you to see if it's drives, if this board is messing up, because I've had this board do it a couple times. And if all else fails, I have had these units, I've had that secondary function manifold, I've had those go bad internally. It's very rare. I've only replaced, I think I replaced one of the valves in one of these, is because it was the problem it was having. Forget the problem it was having, but it was having a major problem where it simply would, I think it was with the park brake. The park brake wouldn't apply. So I took and went through and troubleshooted it, and it turned out to be the manifold was bad inside. So that's one of the last things. But basically that relay board and that function manifold are very expensive. So you want to make sure that it's absolutely that's the problem. So, and then with these systems like that function manifold is very rare. So, whereas the relay board, unfortunately, is not as rare as I'd like it to be because of how expensive that relay board is. But the most common ones are those two pressure switches, the park brake valve, and then simply the relay and the fuses. So hopefully this gives you a little insight into the workings of the drive system on this. So till next video.